Hi, welcome back to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. I'm Doug O'Brien, your host. And on today's episode, I have a very special guest. It's me. I'm being interviewed today by my friend Harlan Kilstein, who will be asking me questions about the User's Guide to Storytelling. This is the book that I wrote over a 10-year period and has been published recently. And I'd certainly love people to know about it. So that's what this is all about. So we're going to have Harlan here to ask me some questions about this really wonderful, I think, my wonderful book. Let's put it that way. I think it's good. Here we go. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. So, Dr. Kilstein, thank you so much for being here. For accepting.
Always a pleasure. I always get the biggest compliments after I've been on Doug's podcast.
Really? From who?
From people who've seen the podcast, strangers all over the world, right? To me and say, I learned so much. I wish I could meet this Dobson guy.
Yeah, I get that too. Well, we're not talking about him today.
No, we're not. But it's really kind of funny that we actually accidentally started with Dobson. Like when I think about storytelling, I think about Milton Erickson. I think about Dave Dobson. And when I think about Doug O'Brien, I think about hypnosis. I think about him consulting. I think about him coaching and counseling people. And just this week, someone came to me that they have Bell's palsy. Which was stress related, and they literally can't speak.
Wow.
They have all kinds of facial formations, and it's all due to stress. And they said, what should we do? The first thing I said was, call Doug O'Brien. And I didn't know that, when they called Doug O'Brien, there was a good chance he might tell them a story. But so tell me about the connection. Erickson, Dobson, O'Brien.
Well,
someday that's going to be the Hypnosis Hall of Fame. It's going to be those three busts up on the wall.
Mount Rushmore. Well, thank you. I mean, goodness gracious, if ever there was company to be honored to be mentioned in, it's those two. And interestingly, when I was doing,
it reminds you of a story.
It does remind me of a story. I didn't want to go there. I was trying to not say that. But when I was doing some research for about Erickson and hypnosis and stuff, I remember, I think it was Jay Haley, one of Erickson's authors, who's written about Erickson a lot. It was in a video that he said that one of Erickson's faults was that he didn't teach anything explicitly. And we were both there when Dobson would say, "Oh, you don't want to left brain this stuff. You just want to let it be and let your right brain take care of it." They were not really good teachers, Erickson and Dobson. I have always felt that teaching is an art, and you can actually do things both explicitly and other than consciously. You can tell the stories, but you can also say, and this is the way you do, how to do hypnosis. Step one, do step two. There's a step-by-step procedure. Storytelling is an art. What I've discovered is an art. Some people are gifted at it. And yes, Erickson, Dobson were really truly my early inspirations for why to get good at storytelling, because it was so effective the way they did it, right? So I learned their stories. I studied the way they spoke, their cadences, the way they used their voices when they did it. Dobson and Erickson had very different voices, so there's a lot of studying as to like what was essential about the way you speak when doing hypnotic storytelling that maybe is different from any other sort of storytelling. But when I'm writing this book, when I'm teaching these classes, I want people to come away from the class not just going like, wow, what a great storytelling Dobson was, or a great storyteller Doug is. I want them to go like, wow, I can learn this and be a great storyteller myself. So my desire is to pass along to other people how to be like Erickson, how to be like Dobson, how to, be a better storyteller in whatever realm of storytelling that you want to do that in.
Now, if we think about Erickson's stories, I mean, certainly he was the master of producing change, but his stories were extremely simple. Very often they would be about a grandchild, or he would tell stories about a patient that he
Yeah.
had seen, hoping
Yeah.
to replicate. Even his most famous, his first example of a story, the famous therapeutic metaphor that he had calculated line by line. Um, Boring as heck. Boring as heck. I mean, uh, I don't know how that had to be while the client was in a deep trance, because
Right.
nobody would, at least an hour or two long as a story. Um, and Dobson's stories, I guess they were kind of similar, but your stories are radically different. They are real, they are alive, they are contemporary and not ancient history. Um, it seems as if you have built on top of those two and gone and created something original. This is not just, okay, here's what Dave and Milton did step by step.
Right.
You have created something far more significant than that.
Wow. Well, thank you for saying that. I that's quite a statement, and I really appreciate you saying that. It's wow. All I can say is that yes and no, because Erickson's stories were sometimes quite succinct. He would tell little anecdotes. I remember a video watching with him doing hypnosis with Nick and Mondi, um, where Nick said, "I don't want to come out of trance," and Erickson took a deep breath and went, "No, you don't want to come out of a trance. You don't want a charming story to end. You don't want a flower to wilt. And yet you do like reality." And he did that famous thing where he was like looking away, but when he wanted to give the hypnotic suggestion, he looked directly at the person. So like, this is meant for you, buddy, this suggestion. So that was very, very short example. He would sometimes do short things. He was also famous for being like ridiculously long. Like you said, 2 hours of a droning on over and over, repetitive, boring as heck kind of thing, boring a person into hypnosis. So I think it really depends on the outcome for the story that you are trying to tell. So as an example, I would not be I would not be shy about telling a Ericksonian like story that goes on and drones on and drones on, if there's a reason for that for my therapeutic client. If I'm telling a story at a Moth competition, I would never do that, because this is a story that's supposed to be entertaining, so there's moments and drama and intrigue and those different things that are, necessary in, keeping an audience's attention. So I'll certainly use a lot of the same things. I'm going to make sure I'm using visual, auditory, kinesthetic word choices to keep everybody in the audience engaged. But it really depends on the outcome. So as much as I appreciate that compliment, and I deeply appreciate the compliment, I'm going to play back this tape several times over my lifetime, just to hear you say that over and over again. I can't really agree that that's something I've developed that's entirely out of whole cloth and new. I think that many other people tell very similar sorts of stories. It sort of really depends on the outcome. And I think one of the things that perhaps I can lay claim for is to be able to tell the difference, is to know know what different sorts of stories can be, and then to be able to use them as appropriate in different circumstances.
So when Erickson and Dobson told stories, it was for therapeutic purposes.
Right, exactly.
It seems that your storytelling book is aimed at a much wider audience.
Exactly.
Who is storytelling relevant for? I mean, I know it's relevant for teachers because I used to be a teacher and I would tell stories all of the time.
Yeah.
Who else should be able to tell stories?
And in fairness, Dobson and Erickson were both teachers as well. Many of the stories that we know of Erickson's and Dobson's were because we sat in classes with Dobson, or we have videotapes recording of Erickson teaching classes. So their stories were also teacher-oriented stories, teaching a concept about people, about psychology, about hypnosis. So it's teachers for sure want to be able to tell stories. But
notice, folks, I'm trying to get him to build his audience to sell copies of the books. And no, I can't get him to go there. He doesn't know that I'm saying this, but I'm trying to get him to expand on his audience, sell more copies. It's a really good book. Oh, I'm sorry.
Wow, that's amazing. I was just in a little trance for a second. I didn't even hear anything you said. So people want to buy this book because it's so the stories do work for everybody. Teachers, yes. Therapists, yes. But coaches, whether you're a little league coach or whether you're a life coach or anything else, coaches have to grab kids' attention, people's attention, and impart to them a salient point that they want to get across, like a teacher would, like a therapist would, but they do it in a different context. So a baseball coach might be telling stories about, Mickey Mantle and how you got to keep on slugging or whatever. They might have, particular stories that a little kid baseball player or a big kid baseball player would be, interested in. So you got to find the stories that work for your audience. And what's true about this book, The User's Guide to Storytelling, which I happen to have a copy of right here. I'll show you in a moment. But well, you know what I could do? I'll show you. Here's how about this, Dr. Kilstein? There's my book. The User's Guide. People should buy. But it has stuff in there for everybody. It has sections on using storytelling in business. Using storytelling in business, whether you're, a CEO talking to your employees and how to motivate them and to get them to do the jobs that you want them to do, or whether you're a salesman and you're trying to paint a picture of why this car is the best car for you and how you're going to really enjoy it long term. Here's a story about that. Storytelling is useful for all pursuits, even for fun. As an example, Harlan.
One of the most famous storytellers of the world is not in the world of therapy at all. And as a matter of fact, the man tells so many stories that he was once berated by Congress for telling stories. I'm talking about Warren Buffett, who tells so many stories that people have actually collected his stories and published them. And when he was in front of Congress and they were asking him questions, he answered with stories. And finally, one of the senators got all upset and said, every time we ask you a question, you answer with a story. Could you just answer the question straight? And he said, this is the way I talk, that I am answering the question straight. And he persuaded people along the way. He didn't start out, the Warren Buffett. He started out as like a nobody. And his stories created one of the most powerful companies in the world. And yet, the mechanism that he used to speak to people in business and finance and in Congress was telling stories. Right. They're that powerful.
Yeah, they are powerful, and yet they might not be powerful depending on how you tell your story. And that's one of the major points of this book, is that, well, Harlan, you and I both come from the world of NLP, right? NLP is about modeling. How did Bandler and Grinder get good at Ericksonian hypnosis? They modeled Milton Erickson. They had access to the man. They modeled him. They saw what he did. So modeling. When I was first learning piano, how to be a piano player, and I'm a piano player, I remember seeing some great piano players playing, like Chick Corea was one of my heroes back in the 70s. And the first time I saw him play, I said, shit, I can never play like that. I could never do that. But then I learned NLP along the way. And I also saw Chick Corea coincidentally play soon after that. And I thought, oh, wow, I can do that too. I can find out the mechanism for how he does that, and I can take that on myself. There are good storytellers. Perhaps Warren Buffett is one of them. There are not such great storytellers. But
a not such great storyteller can become a better storyteller.
Yes.
If they get the right coaching.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
direction.
That's it.
In other words, but I don't recall ever going, okay, this is how you tell a story.
Yeah. Did Dobson ever do that? No. Did Erickson ever do that? No. Nobody, well, not nobody, but very few people actually do that, how to tell a story. But it is something that can be learned. It is an art form, and you can get better at it.
Okay. So one of our mutual good friends was really at the core of taking storytelling and NLP and expanding it. And that was David Gordon.
Yeah.
In Therapeutic Metaphors.
Great book.
Which he published in 1978. By 1979 or 80, he was already saying, oops, left some stuff out of that. Never went back and revised it, although he taught it. But I don't get that you're following David's model. How do you differ?
Well, you know what? David's model is included in my book. There is a section on therapeutic storytelling which directly quotes David Gordon and his structure for the isomorphic metaphor in there. It is included because, it was great. And he did leave some stuff out. But
good thing you didn't write to him and ask him for his thoughts, because you would have gotten 23 pages about what you needed to do with your book.
That's why,
David, if you're watching, I meant it kindly.
Well, that's really, in a way, I did write to him and show him the book, but I didn't ask for any input or response, because I had done that with the User's Guide to Sleight of Mouth book, and I just sent it to him because I wanted him to write a nice little quote for the cover. It's like, well, this is a great book. He sent me back the manuscript with the red lines through all this other stuff. He corrected all these things. He said, this should be an appendix. And so it set me back a few months, but I did what he said. It made the book much better. So I deeply appreciate the man's ability.
Sleight of Mouth book, also available on Amazon.
User's Guide to Sleight of Mouth. Thank you, Dr. Harlan. So, let me tell you a story. When I was a kid, I had a friend named Steve. And Steve was like my best friend. We met in kindergarten, but we were best friends all the way through, junior high school, and we did all kinds of things together. And then we'd go to gatherings with other friends, and he would tell stories about what we had done, and be like, "Wow, I wish I was there." And I was there. I was the main character in some of these stories, but he had a way of telling stories that just was like so interesting. It made it so alive and so compelling. And that's an art. Some people think, oh, well, he's a good storyteller. Yeah, fine. But doesn't mean you can't be. Doesn't mean you can't learn how to do what he does. And that's, in a sense, what I've been endeavoring to do with this book, is what are those things that good storytellers do? And those are, what this book is about, really. So actually, the first part of the book is about sort of like a history lesson, if you will, an overview of history of great storytellers throughout history, starting from like way, way back, the cave dwellers and et cetera. But then up through modern day storytellers like, Walt Disney and, et cetera. But then the second half of the book is how do you do that? How do you find a story and create it such that sort of thing where people go like, wow, I want to be there too. How do you do that? And that's what this book is really about.
Now, you've been working and coaching people since the 1980s, 70s, 80s?
No, not 70s, 80s. Yeah. I mean, I was teaching piano throughout the 80s. I segued into doing this work in the late 80s, early 90s.
In that period of time, you've probably worked with hundreds, if not thousands of people.
Over those, since then, yes, absolutely.
Okay. What are some of the great stories that you had to share?
Wow. I wish I'd done that. You're going to ask me that question. Well, Dr. Harlan, there are just so many to choose from. I will, are you asking me what stories did I tell to my clients, or what?
No, I mean client results as a result of stories. Are you hearing that background noise?
No,
just
I'm not hearing it. Well, I'll tell you, this one interesting situation was this guy came to me who had been to a Tony Robbins workshop, and he really was impressed with that, and called Tony back in those days. Tony, he didn't answer the phone, but they got his office and they said, well, Tony can't see people individually, but we have these other NLP people we've trained who we can refer you to. So I got a referral from this guy, and he came to my office and he said, I don't want you to do any of that NLP stuff on me. I'm like, and what are you here for? And he said, I don't want you to do any of that hypnosis stuff on me. I said, okay, what do you want? He said, I just want you to listen to me and hear what I'm saying. Listen to me, really listen to me. And then, how do you say, acknowledge my feelings, something like that. So I listened to him, and I was like, so wow, yeah, I can see how you feel that way. And I sort of did that. And finally, after like 2-3 sessions, he finally said, okay, now you can talk. So I said, but don't do any of that hypnosis stuff. Don't do any of those NLP stuff. Okay, I won't. Let me just tell you a story. So I was able to kind of gently get my foot in the door with doing something of therapeutic importance with this fella through storytelling, because he was disarmed by that. They were just stories. There were stories about me doing my laundry, very simple things, but within those stories, a gifted storyteller, not gifted story, a learned storyteller can impart suggestions within that. Can take the story about doing the laundry, and when I was folding my socks, I realized that life is really about being careful folding your socks, because when you fold your socks carefully, everything is just kind of simplified, and you feel that sense of accomplishment, don't you? And so one of the reasons I was telling this story about my doing laundry is because the guy wasn't doing any kind of laundry or much in the way of self-care. And so, kind of like Erickson, I started noticing that he started changing little bits by little bits. He came in, one time, and he didn't smell bad. And so I just said, hey, well, looking good. Just very little thing. But I just wanted to stay with the acknowledging his feelings. I don't think that's the exact word he didn't use, not acknowledge, but verify or something. He had a word for that he needed to have happen. So I did that, and I told them stories, and that was the way I was able to get in to have any sort of therapeutic impact. Now, of course, back in those days, I was doing NLP as a full-time profession, and I was able. It was common to call yourself an NLP therapist. That's what we did. So I was acting in the guise of a therapist, although I was only certified as an NLP practitioner, master practitioner, and hypnotherapist. These days, I do some of the same sorts of things, but also always in the guise of just being a coach. So I speak therapeutically sometimes because it's what I used to do and what I've been trained in Ericksonian hypnosis certainly to do. But I'm really a coach these days.
Okay. So, what do you think are the personal characteristics for someone who is a storyteller? What do they need to have? I'm not talking about like the ability to have a wonderful voice or sound like Walter Cronkite or change their tones or whatever. What do you think needs to come from in here to be a good storyteller?
Yeah.
What kind of emotional connection do people need to
Wow.
make?
That is a very, very wonderful question, Harlan. Thank you. And that's, oh gosh, I've been studying, like I said, it took me 10 years to write this book. Not because I'm slow, because I did a lot of research. There's lots of reasons for it, but I really wanted to dive in, so I got involved in doing Moth competitions. The Moth is a storytelling thing in America where you can, go into a group of people and put your name in a hat. And if your name is pulled out, then you can tell a story for that evening in front of people. So there's usually 10 storytellers per night. And they have to be true stories. And some of them are really good. There's a guy who wrote the foreword to my book, actually, Matthew Dix, who has, won. These are kind of, they call them story slams. So there's ad hoc committees who act as judges for the evening. And so he's won a story competition like 90 times over, I don't know how many years, 10, 15 years. It's extraordinary. But when you listen to Matthew tell a story, he is not using a wide variety of tones and tonalities. He's not acting out the story. He's not an actor at all. In fact, his tonality is kind of like this. It's not a very attractive tonality in any way, shape, or form. But he gets the point across, and he has a story structure. I mean, his stories are so well crafted that you don't need to have that sort of theatrical, and now from stage left entered death, and death came in and said, reach, you don't have to do that sort of theatrical stuff to tell a story.
Just stage left. Matthew, we're not promoting your book. Okay, we're here for God.
But yeah.
It was nice of you to endorse Doug's book. Okay, but enough about you. Let's go back.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that is his way of telling stories is not dependent on theatrical ability to tell the stories, but there are other storytellers who do rely on that, whose ability to tell a story is just they could read a phone book to you, and you'd be going like, wow. And for those of you who don't remember, phone books were things where you had listings of telephone numbers, and that's all it was, is a name and telephone number, a whole big listing like that. Look it up. Google it. At any rate, he could read a menu. Let's put it that he could read the IHOP menu, and you'd be fascinated by it. It would be like, whoa, pancakes with bacon. It would just, you'd be taken by it emotionally because he has such an ability to tell the story. I'm looking for how do you find that place where it's right for you? How do you use your voice and your body in the way that you feel comfortable telling your story so that it comes across? There are hundreds of really great storytellers, thousands of really great storytellers. They're all different. There's no one way to do it. There's no one right way to do it. But there are things that work, and there are things that you can get better at and find out, the structure of a story, and, make the story structure great. Practice on using your tonality different if that's going to help. Get better at that. There are definitely things one can do to get better. And I think, one of the things that I've seen amongst a lot of great storytellers is that they're willing to be vulnerable. They're willing, to just reveal themselves, to say I felt this way, and to put it out there, to be in a way naked, emotionally, in front of 100 people, and just keep going. One of the most effective stories I ever saw was a woman named Kathy Buckley, a deaf comedian. She was just extraordinary, and she was funny as a comedian. She was fine. She was good. And then she was at a Tony Robbins event, Tony Robbins certification course. He used to bring comics in halfway through because they're very intense things. So he wanted to lighten up the mood a little bit. So Kathy came in and she did her set and it was fine. But then he said, so he got up on stage and started saying, so Kathy, what's your life about? How did you get into comedy and stuff? And so she's deaf, very unusual. So she started telling the story about her life that was, oh my God, just so emotionally. I mean, there was not literally, I'm telling you, not a dry eye in the house. People were weeping listening to her story. And she talked, she kept talking. She was crying. Everybody was crying, telling the story, but she was able to continue talking while she was being just open to everybody. That's a superpower. That's a superpower when you can just be okay being ridiculous or being pitiful or being whatever. And yet you still stand up there like, yes, here I am, folks. This is me. And you tell your story. That's a superpower. And I think that's one of the reasons that this Moth phenomenon is so big. Hundreds of people go to these Moth things every week in New York. I mean, around the country, around the world, these story slams are always sold out as far as I can tell. And people want to go there to witness that and maybe even to do that. Interestingly, I thought when you went to a room full of 150 people or 200 people, when you put your names in hat, I thought like everybody was putting their names in that hat. It's not everybody. It's maybe 25 people out of the 150 people that put their name in that hat, and 10 people get picked. So why is everybody else there? They're there to witness, they're there to see that person up on stage do that. And I think that's one of the beautiful things. And also, just by the way, every time I've gone to one of the story competitions, people are so supportive. I mean, everybody in the audience is like, go, you can do it. Oh, that was great. Good story. It's an awesome job. Everybody's always so supportive. It's such a beautiful community of storytellers.
Wow. Now, what are your hopes, not expectations? What are your hopes that someone who reads your book, goes through it, how is it going to change them?
Well, hopefully in the way I've just described, to make it more give them the ability to tell their story. Give them the ability to tell their story in a way that feels authentic and right to them, and hopefully gives them some of the craft of doing so that they get the response they're hoping for. Harlan, I'm a piano player, and if we were to widen the scene here a little bit, there's a piano in the background. I've spent years studying the piano, and I think it's an interesting truth that piano playing, music is a beautiful art form, and really what it's about is sharing and touching other souls in a way with music. But when you're studying music at a conservatory, it's about getting the notes right. It's about playing the right tempo. It's about who's doing it right, who's not doing it quite right. And so there are competitions, and you got to work for them. I entered these competitions, and you would practice and practice and practice and practice and practice, honing your skills, honing your craft to do, play as well as possible. And throughout these competitions, one thing was true: only one person won the competition. And that could be great for them. Maybe they'd get a contract or something depending on the level of the competition. But everybody won, in a way, because they were practicing so hard and becoming such better technicians and musicians because they practiced so hard to try to win, right? So they did win. They got vastly better than they ever would have if they were just doing it for fun, right? So there's a sense of what does competition bring you? What does this ability to practice? Some of the best storytellers, as far as winning the Moth are concerned, like this guy Matthew Dix, but also Adam Wade and other people that I know that have won many times, they're always writing stuff down. Matthew has a thing he calls homework for life, and he puts stuff every day. He's putting some stuff down in there. Adam Wade keeps a shoebox under his bed. He's got copious boxes full of story ideas. He keeps putting slips of paper in there with story ideas. I mean, it's a craft that they practice and hone and work on. So you can get better at it, and it might take a little work.
All right. Sometimes people want to jump in. I'm generally a jump in person. NLP, I'm in. I remember going to Barnes & Noble back in the days when there was one Barnes & Noble on Fifth Avenue and 18th Street.
Wow.
And looking for books on NLP and coming out with like arms full of books of NLP and sitting down and going, okay, now I got all these books. What am I going to do with them? And I was like, Structure of Magic, Patterns of Milton Erickson. And then someone said, start with Frogs into Princes. Okay, Frogs into Princes. And I was like, oh, that's it. But there was a place to start. Where does someone start if you were to create the quick start guide to storytelling? Where would you send people in your book?
In my book?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would start. I was about to make a joke, but in all seriousness, there's the book, like I said, is divided into two halves. The first part is all history. The second part is how to tell your story. So start at the second half of the book. It's written in such a way that it does take a person from the very simplest type of thing, like a story. What is a story? It's a 3-part thing. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. How do you do that? We start from the simplest story that I know of. It's just Ernest Hemingway was famous for writing a 6-word memoir, right? Ernest Hemingway's memoir was for sale, baby shoes, never worn. And so in 6 words, he created this story that was like, oh, right? So we have people do that. We have people write their life story in 6 words, 6-word memoirs. So it starts from that sort of idea of what's the point to your story? What's the real succinct, most integral part of the story? And then how do you build it out from there? So yeah, that's what I'd say.
That was an absolute mouthful. Now, it seems to me that, when it came to a sleight of mouth, oh my God, Doug O'Brien has a book on sleight of mouth. Let's go grab it. And in fact, it's literally become a bestseller on Amazon. I mean, it's just year after year, people discover sleight of mouth and they discover the world of Doug O'Brien, and that's great. But there are so many books on the market about storytelling. What makes your book different?
The pictures.
Well, there are great pictures. There are great pictures.
There's pictures. Yeah, if you don't know this, folks, it's filled with pictures. Pictures everywhere. I mean, everywhere. It's beautiful. My man Gene Sweeney laid it out and did all these pictures for me. I mean, we collaborated and stuff. It really is Gene. It's beautiful and it's fun. It's fun and it's succinct. You don't have to spend hours of reading in order to say what's the point here. Well, how can I do this for myself? This is easy. Grab it. It's open. So it's fun. It's easy, but the meat is really rich stuff. So it gives you the as easily dosed as possible, the most effective medicine for how to cure your storytelling.
One thing is that whenever I listen to you, it's never dull. You're always making jokes. You're always easy to follow. So when you were talking about what makes your what's your book different is that there's so many people who come across as an academic approach to storytelling. Let me give you the, this is the proper way to tell a story. This is the posture you must have. I'm gonna stop, whatever. And you're like into like, this is roll in the mud and have a good time storytelling. This is let's help people change storytelling. This isn't like screw the form. We're not the people playing in the orchestra on the Titanic as it sinks. We're the ones having, putting ice in our cocktails and having a good time. It's a totally different experience. Now, I don't know if people know this, and I'm not saying this to brag, but I did my doctoral dissertation on the use of storytelling in the classroom. And so as part of the research, I had to have and read every book about storytelling at the time. I had an entire library of storytelling books.
Wow.
Around, and I'm seeing like so many of them are gone. I don't know what happened to all of the books I had. I must have given them away over the years. But I haven't found any book in all of the years. Now, I got my doctorate in 82, 83 or so. And so for like 5 years before, I was looking at everything. And I've certainly kept up in the world of storytelling and business with people adapting it for business. Someone called me up and goes, "You've got to read this book about stories and branding and whatever." And I'm like, it's sitting on my Kindle. I can't read it. But Doug's book is fun. I mean, you pick it up, you read it, and you just forget about time. You are transported to a different world. And I want you to know, with him listening, the sneaky bastard, you know what he does? He actually changes you, helps you become a better person just by reading his book. He doesn't say that. Notice, his secret agenda was to help everybody become a better person just by reading the book and helping you find the good stuff inside of you and show you how to share it. And that, to me, is really what sets Doug apart. Even though he has written a book, he is secretly a change agent out to improve your lives. So, Doug, can you do that like cute thing where you put us to the side and you showed the book again?
Okay. There we go.
You froze for a second. There it is.
There it is.
That's it. The User's Guide to Storytelling by Doug O'Brien. It is absolutely incredible. This is called Essential Coaching Skills. If you are, this is an essential skill for coaches. If you have not read this book and you are not using storytelling, I'm not sure that I would even call you a coach. Because if you're using logic and you're using your left brain, both Uncle Milty and good old Dave would go, "What kind of a coach are you?"
Well, I think I picked the right guy to interview me today. Thank you, Harlan. That's amazing. I did not know that you did a doctorate on storytelling. That's astonishing to me. Wow.
You know what's really astonishing?
What?
That I did it in WordStar back in the 70s and 80s on a little 3.5-inch floppy, and I can't get to my damn files.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's the funny thing about technology. It's like, where could you possibly go to take a floppy disk and say, "Hey, could you play this for me?" You can't do it anymore. It's just nuts. Wow, that's amazing. I haven't heard that word in a long time. Wow. Nice. Hope that you printed out a copy of your dissertation.
Oh, I have, and I can order more copies from was it Xerox University or Microfilms Online. By the way, don't order my book thinking that you're going. It's like all the scientific stuff, and the stories aren't mine because they made me scientifically do the book. I remember I had a conversation with Stephen Gilligan and David Gordon, who in his own unique way wrote a very long he wrote an endorsement of how great the book was and whatever, and then he wrote a separate letter saying this is for you to read with all the suggestions of what I needed to do to improve it. Stephen Gilligan was very kind. He wrote an endorsement of the book and then also said a separate note, and he goes, isn't it sad that they make us do all of this BS just to get the degree? He goes, I feel you. Dr. Erickson told me the same thing. So I felt I was in very good company. But
Hey.
don't track it down. Track down. I'm doing my last push here.
Okay, go.
You should really get Doug's book on storytelling. It will enable you to not only change others, but it will bring out the best in you and take you to. I'm not done. And will take you to new levels. It's going to be one of those books that you're going to go back to time and time again. Every time you open it up, you're going to go, oh, whatever. And by the way, don't tell anyone I told you. There are stories in there that you could literally steal and use. Shh.
Let me know when I can talk now.
You could literally steal and use. Okay.
There's not that many stories, but it's about storytelling. But let me just say this, Harlan. The thing about my book that people should know is that it is in full color. And as such, I don't know why it's true, but it is true that when you buy something in full color, it costs more because of all these colors. Why does color cost more than black and white? But it does. So it costs a lot to print the book. There's honestly not a lot of profit margin for me if you buy the book, as beautiful as it is. So you might be tempted to buy the Kindle because it's a lot cheaper. The Kindle version on Amazon is a lot cheaper. But I will tell you something, it loses something in the translation because it's mostly text. The Kindle is mostly text. We've had to eliminate, in order to fit it onto a Kindle where you can change font sizes, we've had to eliminate about 2/3 of the images. So you can get it on a Kindle. But here's another alternative. If you go to my website, the essentialcoachingskills.com website, right on the front page, there's a little link you can go to the User's Guide to Storytelling page for that. And there you can buy what we call an enhanced PDF. So if you're not doing it on a Kindle, if you want the Kindle, great, it's good. People have read it, just the Kindle, they like the writing, it's good writing. You get all the information on a Kindle, it's good. And if you're looking at it like on an iPad or something else that's not a Kindle per se, that has color, you can get the enhanced PDF on my website for the same price as the Kindle, but it's full color. It's full color with all the layout that we spent months and years working on. It's all there. It enhances your experience. It does. You can also, if you buy it on my website, you can also, I will send it to you directly. If you buy a hardcover on my website, I will send it to you and I will autograph it and I'll send it to you directly. It might cost, it's a discounted rate, but without the shipping, it'd probably be about the same price. But,
now, remember when I talked about Mount Rushmore?
Yeah.
So an autographed book by Milton Erickson sells for like $600 to $1,200. Fortunately, I have a couple of them. I don't know of any autographed books by Dave Dobson because he probably would have gotten mad at the idea of a book. But who knows? Years from now, when we have those 3 people on Mount Rushmore, what's that Doug O'Brien signature going to be worth?
Priceless.
Priceless. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's another reason to get it directly.
Yeah, but I promise you, excuse me, it is a good book, and I appreciate, Harlan, I appreciate you doing what you've done today to help me to let people know about it. I do really feel strongly that you can, if you're interested in improving your storytelling, this will help you do that.
And the reason that this came about is because, as great of a coach as Doug is, he did a really crappy job of telling his favorite audience about this book. And so I had to say, we're doing a reverse podcast. I'm interviewing you about the book. And he thought about it for a while and said, you know what? I haven't. To his most valuable audience, he kept this a secret. I'm shocked and embarrassed to know him. But meanwhile, go get the book. It's on Amazon. Or get a signed copy directly from Doug.
Yeah, it'll be in the program notes. So Harlan, thanks so much for this. And for every you listening, thank you for bearing with us for this. How long has it been? Almost hour, 51 minutes. Appreciate you being here. Bye for now. This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.